Right, good evening. So we have 10 people. I was waiting for more to join, but let's start in the interest of time. So we have completed the topic we did the other day. If you all can remember, we were discussing about market risk and then investment risk, right? So we didn't discuss investment risk, right? So today we have to do investment risk. Hope you all have got the questions. Let me share the screen. Hope you all can see the screen.
Yes, sir.
Can you see?
Yes, sir.
Oh, okay. Right. So let's start with question number 1. Share the poll. But I still have only 6 responses. So I think others are not interested in responding. Let me go to the question. So the class will get delayed when we go slow. If you can respond fast, I can also take up. Right? Okay. Anyway, I still have only 7. What's the question? Which one of the following methods involves taking an offsetting position to reduce market risk in a portfolio? So I think we've discussed this enough in the previous case. Yes, I'm getting questions from the audience. Can we move fast? Yes, I can move fast. I'm also willing to move fast. You all have to cooperate because now this is the revision time. I have done the lecturing, so you all have to cooperate by responding fast. Then I can go fast as well, right? Because this is your time. Otherwise, I can even share the answers in a separate sheet and give it to you. You can easily file it. That's not the whole purpose. We want to discuss, deliberate, understand. So please cooperate if that's the case. So you can learn and everyone can benefit out of it. Okay. I think we've discussed this. Right? Maybe yes, I can do so as well. As someone suggested, I can also give a specific timeline and let you all respond, and I can move. Yeah, that's also a good suggestion. So I can do that. So then can we look at about 2 minutes? Is that enough? Yeah, 2 minutes enough. And I'll see the responses as well. If there are complicated sums with calculations, I will give you more time, but as a standard, I'll give you 2 minutes. So I'm going to close the question after 2 minutes. So that will be easier for me. Right. Let me set my thing. Okay. So the first question is not a new question. We have done similar questions. We are familiar. So when you have an offsetting position, that is very easy. It's hedging. It's hedging. Right? So I still can see different people are giving different answers. That gives me the impression that we still need a lot of work. You can see out of 8, 4 people have given the incorrect answer. Right? So please check your answers and do your homework. Okay, let's go to the question. The answer is A. Let's go to question number 2. I'm giving you okay, I'm giving only 2 minutes. You can go ahead. Let me, yeah, poll is open. Right, 15 seconds to go. Still, I have got 6 responses. Right, time is up. Let me look at the question. Now you need to look at the question carefully. If an individual invests £10,000 into a 5% coupon bond at a price of 200, the nominal income return would be. So you need to understand what's the market price and the nominal price or standard price of a bond. So there are certain standard prices for different securities, right? So in a bond, generally the standard price or the nominal price of a stock is how much? Any guess?
100.
100. It's £100. That's a standard, right? It's 100. So generally you have bonds at 100. So when you have to pay, you are paying a premium of another 100 to buy this. So the coupon is applied on the nominal price, right? Whatever the market price you pay to acquire the investment or the bond, the coupon is applied on the standard or the nominal price. Then the 5% will be applied on the normal. So when you spend 10,000, you get on a nominal basis, you spend 10,000 to purchase 5,000 worth of stocks. Is that clear? Because you are paying 100% extra for the price. So when you pay 10,000, you actually buy 5,000 worth of stocks. So your 5% interest will be applied on 5,000. So 5% on 5,000 is how much? 250. So there's only one person. One person has answered correct. So the answer is 250. It's A. Okay. So keep these things in mind. I know for the first time most of you all miss it, but going forward, try to keep this in mind. That's how we need to understand these kind of questions and the standards. Right. Let's move to the next question. Question number 3. I'll relaunch the poll. Okay. Your 2 minutes starts now. different answers. Let's look at the question first. Right. So this is a kind of a calculation based question. An investor places 10,000 into a fixed rate account paying 3.25% per annum for a fixed period of 3 years. Inflation is expected to run at 2% for the period of the term. What will be the nominal balance of the account at the end of the term, assuming that interest is reinvested at the same rate? So what do? We need to get, you know how we generally do this. Let me look at the annotation. Right. That is 10,000 into 1 plus 3.25%, that is 0.325 to the power 3 is our normal future value calculation for 3 years. Right. Now, what do we get at the end? When you calculate like this for the 3-year period, you will get the value at the end of the 3rd year in nominal terms. Right? The question is to figure out the value at the end of the 3-year period in nominal terms. So this additional information about this inflation is not relevant for us. That is a confusing factor. If they ask about the real rate, then we have to reduce the impact of inflation. Here, we don't have to do that because the question says you are supposed to calculate the value at the nominal rate, so nominal balance. So the answer to this part is the answer. So what do you get? 10,000 into 1.0325, that is 11,007. That's what I get. 7 something. Yeah, this is the answer I get. So the answer is B. But in this case, I can see you have different answers. Okay. That's why it's very important to read the question carefully. Sometimes there can be misleading information, additional information, unnecessary information. It's very important that we figure out it correctly and then answer. Let's go to the question number 4. Right, let's start. So what's the question? Which of the following details are likely to be included in a fund's investment mandate? What fund it will aim to beat and the minimum error in tracking the benchmark, the withdrawal conditions and the date it will be wound up, the minimum error in tracking the benchmark and the withdrawal conditions, whether it can be hedged, and what fund it will aim to match or beat. So I can see different answers, but as you can see, the question is, which of the following details are likely to be included, right? Not excluded, included. So as most of you all have got it right, is the withdrawal conditions and the date. It will be wound up. So that will be the most important aspect out of the given list that will be included. That is D. Right. Let's go to the question number 5. And the right. Time starts now. Right, the time is up. So we still have only 7 respondents anyway. So question number 5. Tracking error is particularly important in monitoring the performance of FST All Share Index Fund, European Dynamic Growth Fund, Global Growth Fund, Corporate Bond Fund. I know this is a kind of a tricky question that most of you might get confused because we didn't discuss in detail about this kind of thing. So this is a kind of a random question you get. You need to test your luck as well. But if you know what tracking error is, the correct answer is A. I think most of you all have given the correct answer in the list. So out of 8 respondents, 5 have given the right answer. FST All Share Index Fund. Right? Others are specific funds, but the tracking error you generally mark with the pool or a general fund. So they invest these funds, you are trying to benchmark. What is tracking error? It reflects the variance of performance from the given index. So the correct answer is A. Most of you all have got it right. Let's go to the next question. Question number 6. Yeah, time ticks now. So we have a question. Frank is a portfolio manager and is considering an investment which, while not strictly forbidden by his firm, is marginally out of step with company policy. Frank's proposed action would benefit from risk review with other fund managers, peer review with independent risk managers in the firm, peer review with other fund managers, risk review with independent risk managers in the firm. So understand the situation here, right? Understand the situation here. The situation is that then say, while not strictly forbidden by his firm, that means whatever the deviation that is looking at is not really outside the mandate, not really against the policy, right? Not really against the policy, but that is somewhat different to your usual way of handling investment. That's what it says. It's marginally out of step with company policy, right? It's little away from the policy, but not against the policy as such, right? Not forbidden, not illegal or anything. Now, then what would you do? So for you to justify this, for you to rationalize your action or to discuss or convince the rest of the people, what would you do? So in the given list, it's more than the risk component. It's about looking at whether we are in line with the industry or the rest of the people. Yes, we are a little away from our general practice, but are we within the industry? How our peers do, right? So then you have a better indication of your position. If you are taking a position that is far away from what industry would do, then there is a point for us to consider. But if your action is somewhat within the purview or similar to the industry, so you are somewhere there. That's what you need to establish. So with the given answers, the best answer for me is in that case, peer review with other fund managers, because this in-house reviews won't help here. You need to see whether you are within the industry or an outlier. So the correct answer in that case is C. Understand the context very clearly when you answer these kind of questions. Right. Question 7. Right, the time is up. What type of return does a coupon on a bond provide? Nominal, total, real holding period. I think it's very clear. It's very clear. We all know, we discussed it's nominal. Answer is A. Right. Let's go to the next question. Right, the time is up. Let's see the question. Which one of the following is considered a disadvantage of venture capital investing? Disadvantage. Huh? The investment is illiquid, potentially higher returns, negative correlation with bonds and cash, income tax relief on investment. So based on the given list, there are advantages and disadvantages. So the question is about disadvantage. Yeah, the illiquid part is a disadvantage because when the investment is illiquid, because at the initial stages, until you introduce that investment into a stock market or something, you can't easily trade it or sell it and go. So the correct answer, therefore, is A. Let's go to the next question. Question number 9. A portfolio's alpha measures its excess return over risk-free interest rate, its volatility relative to the market volatility, its outperformance against its benchmark, how closely a portfolio follows its benchmark index. So I think we've discussed all these concepts. You all can remember, I believe. So what exactly it measures? It measures outperformance against the benchmark, and most of you all have got it right based on the given answers. So the answer is C. Let's go to the next question. Okay, time starts now. The question is, the return on investment unadjusted for inflation is known as the basic return, total return, nominal return, whole liquid return. I think we have discussed this before as well. It's what most of you have got it right. It is nominal return. So the answer is C. Go to the next question, but I still get incorrect answers. I got 2 people getting the wrong answer. So please get it right. Okay, go to the next question. Right. The question is, an investment with which of the following beta factors is likely to be a defensive stock? Defensive stock. 1.4, 1.2, 1.8. So what do you mean by defensive? Defensive means your risk is lower. So with beta factor, what do? We look at the risk of a security related to the market risk, right? So volatility of a securities return against the market. So we multiply the market risk by the beta factor to get the securities risk. So when we have a lower beta factor, your securities risk figure will come down. So in the given list, the lowest figure is 0.8. So that's the defensive stock. So the correct answer is D. I can see 5 out of 10 have answered correctly. They still have incorrect answers, right? 50% incorrect. Right. Let's go to the question number. Answer is D. Question number 12. Let's look at the question. Which one of the following strategies would best suit an investor as a way of reducing risk within a portfolio? Invest only in corporate bonds, invest only in tax-free products, invest only in listed companies, invest assets with uncorrelated returns. I think if you look at the given answers, it's very clear, because in all other cases, you can see you are asking to keep all your eggs in one basket, right? So the best answer among the lot is answer D, invest in uncorrelated, so that when there is an eventuality, they don't follow the same trend. I can see out of 12, only 6 have given the right answer. Still, we have 50% giving incorrect answer. Right, let's go to question number 30. Answers, right? We can look at the answers. The question is, which one of the following methods is most likely to be used to mitigate the risk of counterparty failure of fixed interest investments? Right, they have 4 answers: hedging, short selling, credit default swap, diversification. So most of you all have given the correct answer. It's credit default swap, that is C. Right, we'll go to the next question, 14. Right, time is up. I think it's a easy question, as I can see. As assets correlations change over time, asset allocation is of vital importance. The first step in considering the diversification of assets is to assess the prospects of which of the following. Each of the main asset classes in each of the world major investment regions against the backdrop of demand from the fastest growing economies. Each of the main asset classes with each of the world's major investment regions against the backdrop of supply from the fastest growing economies. Each of the main asset classes worldwide against the backdrop of the world economics, political and social environment. Each of the main asset classes within each of the world's major investment regions against the backdrop of the world economic, political and social environment. Yes, if you look at the given answers, the last one sounds much appropriate. And I think I have only 7 responses for this question, but all of them have given the right answer. Good. Time is up. The question is, if £100 is invested now at 3% annual compound interest, the value at the end of 3 years would be. We had similar question before, that you need to calculate 100 into 1.03 and get it. So what's the answer? Yes, it is 109.27. So the correct answer is C. Most of you all have got it right. Let's go to question number 16. Okay, time is up. We'll discuss which one of the following is used to measure how closely a portfolio follows its benchmark index. So again, we've been discussing similar concepts: information ratio, tracking error, standard deviation, alpha. So what's the correct answer? We had a similar question before as well. Benchmark index, that is tracking error. The correct answer is B. Out of 10, 4 have identified that correctly. Let's go to question number 17. Has £100,000 to invest to generate a retirement sum. If they can invest the funds for a 20-year period and will not need any interest, the eventual sum that will be available if the expected annual rate of return is 5% is. I think we've been discussing similar questions several times today. It's not a difficult one. You simply have to get 100,000 multiplied by 1.05 into how many periods? 20 years. So if you look at, I have told you how to get it from calculator as well. So when you put it, you get the correct answer, as most of you all have got it right. The correct answer is 265,329. That's answer B. Correct. Let's go to the next question. Right, the time is up. The question is, given the following information, which fund would be the most suitable for a cautious investor? Fund A, B, C, D, and have historically produced the same returns. The standard deviation is 5, 7, 9, 10. It's very easy one. Very easy one. Because if the returns are the same, we look at the one with the lowest risk, right? So what's the one with the lowest risk? The lowest risk is the one with the lowest standard deviation, that is 5%. 5% is A. The answer is D. So out of 11 answers, only 5 have given the correct answer. So I think that's something for us to think. It's not a difficult question. It's a very easy question. You can easily get the answer if you logically think. Right. So with that, I break the class. Let's have a break. And then we'll get back in 15 minutes, probably. I hope everyone is back. Let's continue. We have done up to 18th question. We have to go with 19. The question is, which of the following portfolios would be expected to show the lowest standard deviation? A portfolio of investment grade corporate bonds, a portfolio of UK smaller companies, a portfolio of UK blue chip equities, a portfolio of global equities. So you need to figure out which has the lowest standard deviation, which means lowest volatility or the risk. We know equity versus bond. Bond would be much more safer, lower risk. And then out of that, investment grade corporate bond stands out. So the correct answer is A. Let's go to the next question. I got majority the right answer. Time is up. Let's see the question. Yields on government bonds are 2% and investment grade corporate bonds are 3%. If interest rate rise, the effect on bond prices would be both government and corporate bond prices would rise. Government bonds prices would remain the same, but corporate bond prices would fall. Government bond prices would fall, but corporate bond prices would rise. Both government and corporate bond prices would fall. So what happens when the interest rates increases? We need to understand there is this combination. Interest rate, if you look at the time value concept, right? Time value concept we discuss, present value thing, right? So you have the value divided by 1 plus rate to the power n, right? You get the present value. Present value is the price generally. So price of a bond is the present value of future cash flows. So what it says is what happens if the interest rate goes up, that is this here. So that is below the line. So when this goes up, this goes down. There's an inverse relationship between the interest rate and the price. So the answer should lie there. So what we need to understand is that when the interest rates go up, the prices come down. So both are bonds, whether it is government or corporate, they are bonds. So the impact is the same. The only difference is the interest rate would be different because of the coupon rate would be different because of the risk factors and all that, but impact will be the same. So the correct answer is D. So out of 8 answers, I got 3 people giving the correct answer. Let's move to the next question. Right. Let's see the question. I'm getting responses, still 8 question responses. If an investment is providing an average return of 3% at a time, when the general levels of prices are increasing by 2.5%, the real return being earned by the investor is. The question is about real return. So we need to first understand. So when it provides average return of 3%. Price increase 2.5. The real return. So how do we get? We discuss the link between nominal rate and the real rate, if you can remember. How do we get it? 1 plus real return to the, by multiplying by 1 plus inflation, you get 1 plus nominal. Average return is 3%, that is 1 plus 0.3. Price increases are 2.5. 1 plus 0.25. So you need to get the answer here. That means 1 plus 0.3 divided by 1 plus 0.25. What is the answer you get? 1 plus 0.3 divided by 1 plus 1.025. That is 1.0048. Right? The answer is 1 point. The answer I get is 1.00487. That's what I get. So when I deduct 1, remove 1 from here, then 0048 means 4.487. That's what I get. But most of you all have got something else. So if I round it off for 2 digits, that is 49. So this is the answer. Out of 9 responses, I got only 1 with the correct answer. Right? So you need to understand the logic, calculations, concept properly to answer this kind of question. Not difficult though, but you need to get it right. Right. So the correct answer is D. Let's go to the next question. Question 23. Let's see the question. In the context of investment returns, standard deviation measures excess return over risk-free interest rate, volatility of an investment value, how closely a portfolio follows its benchmark, difference between highest and lowest values. I think this is a very straightforward question and disappointed to see that out of 9 answers, only 4 have given the correct answer. So this is something that you need to seriously think about, because it's a very basic question. It says investment return standard deviation. Standard deviation is about volatility. That's the risk. It's a very easy one, right? So please do your homework. So the correct answer is B. Got only 4 correct answers out of 9 responses. Right. Let's go to the last question of this paper, 24. Right. So let's see the question. The real rate of return measures nominal rate of return minus inflation, income and capital value over a time period, return generated by income and capital gains, income received and adjusted for inflation. So the question is, real rate. So the correct answer is nominal rate minus inflation. But that calculation happens in a different way. We don't just put minus, we have a formula, but the idea is you deduct the inflation from the nominal rate, you get the real rate. So the correct answer is A. Out of 10 responses, 9 have given the right answer. Correct answer. Right. Let's now move
Excuse
on
me, sir.
to.
Excuse me.
Yes.
So on that basis, previously we had a same like question, right? Where we got the answer as 449 you computed and showed.
Yeah.
Here the different, I mean this is real rate of return, nominal rate divided by minus the inflation. But the previous, you get 4.9 instead of 0.5.
No, that's why I explained you what I said. The formula, when you calculate the real rate, it is 1 plus, right? 1 plus real rate in plus 1 plus inflation is 1 plus nominal rate. That's how you get, right? So when you take the real rate, how we get it is 1 plus nominal rate minus one plus
Inflation.
inflation. You get 1 plus real rate.
Yeah, earlier it was 3% in the nominal rate, 2.5 was the inflation, and most of the guys has answered as 0.05 as the answer,
Yeah,
right?
but this is wrong.
Is this wrong, sir? Your
Yeah, this is
last your
This is wrong. I was just following your this thing. This is not the answer. right? Read the question, right? The question is about the explanation, right? The question is about the explanation, how you explain this. When you talk about real rate, what we say is nominal rate minus inflation is real rate.
Yeah.
That's how we
Yeah.
explain, right? But
Yes.
when we calculate, this is not how we calculate. When you calculate, there's multiplication. 1 plus r multiplied by 1 plus I is 1 plus n. That's how the calculation. But the idea is, what we are doing with this mathematical calculation is, we are eliminating the impact of inflation.
Mhm. Okay,
Right?
sir. Okay.
That's right. So don't just follow the words here and then do like this. What I did earlier. So that's not the way, right? So that's why these are somewhat sometimes you get confused also. But understand it when we say, right? When we explain it, they say nominal rate minus inflation is real rate. But when we
Yeah.
calculate, we don't use the minus mark. It's 1 plus n divided by 1 plus I equals 1 plus r.
Okay, sir. Because I thought of the same way that has to be expressed.
I got you. Yeah.
Okay, sir. Okay. Sorry.
Right. So that's the end of that paper. I think you all have got another paper. Let's open that. You must have got it, right? Anyone who didn't get it? Next topic is liquidity risk. Can you all see the screen?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Let's go one by one. Question number 1. Right. Let's see. Now we are on a different topic. One aspect of liquidity is how easily the asset can be used as collateral for loans. This links liquidity what other type of risk. I think that's quite easy and obvious answer. Credit market volatility operational. So when you use it as a collateral, the collateral cannot be sold. If it's not liquid, it can affect the credit directly. So the correct answer is credit risk. A, out of 10 responses, 9 have given the correct answer. Good. Let's go to the next question. Question number 2. Right. I've got 7 responses. Question number 2. Which one of the following is used to compare the liquidity of different assets? Liquidity of different assets. Bid offer spread, immediacy, resilience, market depth. If you can remember, we've discussed all these as subsectors of this one. So when you look at the liquidity of assets, that means how easily assets can be sold, how active is the market, the volume. So that is mostly dependent on how close the gap between the offer price and bid price. So the correct answer is bid offer spread. So out of 7 responses, 3 have given the correct answer. So the answer is A. Question number 3. Right. Time is up. The question is, if an instrument has deep market depth, it indicates which of the following? It is deeply discounted, it is traded in dark pools, low volumes of trading, higher level of liquidity. So what's the correct answer? We discussed earlier also. These are all connected to liquidity. Market depth. That is higher level of liquidity. Correct answer is D. Yes, most of you are given the correct answer. So therefore, I'm glad that you picked it. Question number 4. Right. Let's discuss question number 3. If an instrument has, 4, we discussed not 3, 4. Which one of the following is a common technique to manage liquidity risk? Behavioral analysis, credit rating, outsourcing, hedging. So what's the correct answer? So the correct answer is behavioral analysis. If you look at the theory, if you can remember, there are few techniques that we use to liquidity. Behavioral analysis, scenario analysis, diversification, and we also discuss counterparty credit limits kind of thing. So these are all techniques we use to manage liquidity. So in the given list, the correct answer is behavioral analysis, that is A. Right, so that concludes today's session. So we Finished 9:30. So I encourage you to read the notes, study well, right? You need to go to the notes, get the concepts right, because today I saw there were few questions where the answer should be obvious. We all know those are some fundamentals, but I saw some of you all didn't give the right answer to those as well. So please go through your notes properly, get the concepts right. It's okay to see some of the complex questions. You don't get it, that's fine. But some basic ones, when you don't get it, that concerns me, because you're now at the revision stage. Please go through your notes, understand the concepts, and I'm more than happy to explain things if you have any clarification during this session as well. So that's why I'm doing for certain people when they query. So others also are free to clarify your doubts, get your in any area you want to clarify, let me know. I will do that. It doesn't matter. Okay, so with that, I conclude for today. We'll see you next week. Until then, stay safe and good night.
Good night, sir.